Hi, everyone. Thanks for being with us today. I'm Gordon Smith, Airlines Editor at Skift, and I'm joined by a familiar face, I'm sure to many of you. That's Jay Shabat, Airline Weekly Senior Analyst. We're here to talk about all things airline consolidation. But before we dive in, just a quick welcome to those who are new to Airline Weekly, because we've got some new people who are maybe exploring the content for the first time, Jay. Representatives from right across the industry joining us. We're delighted to have you with us. If you're not familiar, we like to do things a little differently here at Skift, and that thinking extends to Airline Weekly. Don't worry, this is not going to be 45 minutes of dry charts and tables. We want this to be a conversation. So send us your questions in the chat box, and if we have time towards the end of the session, we will do a Q&A. The total session will probably run to around 45 minutes. But if you're not already aware, Airline Weekly is a subscription-based product from Skift, and we are focused exclusively on the global airline industry. Every week, Jay, myself, and the wider team bring you in-depth analysis. We cover strategy, performance, financials, and innovation from all of the world's major carriers, plus a few sort of under-the-radar carriers that are very, very interesting, but not necessarily spoken about all the time. You might be wondering who reads our content. Typically, that includes senior executives from airlines, lessors, airports, investment firms, and government agencies. And we are a trusted source for not just what we cover, but also how we cover it. We're objective, we're insightful, and we like to have a bit of humor as well, where that's appropriate. But we always do it with an eye towards what matters to the business of flying. If you want to learn more, there's something very special behind that QR code for you. But I will not delay our departure any further, because I know, Jay, everyone in this audience knows and appreciates the importance of an on-time departure. So without further delay, let's get into it. Jay, if you'd be so kind, just set the scene for us before we consider consolidation specifically. Just give us a current sort of state of the airline industry, very, very top line take.
I will do that, Gordon. Thank you, and thanks everybody for joining. We leave it on time here, on time departure. But before we get into our main event here, which is the always exciting and sexy topic of consolidation, I just did want to take a few minutes to give everybody a kind of macro, very, very, very macro view of where we stand in the industry globally, because we are here at the, hard to believe, but we're actually at the halfway point of 2025. So now with 6 months behind us, I just wanted to say that demand overall still looks pretty good. There are obviously exceptions. There are markets where that doesn't apply. There are, maybe a sub-region or two where that doesn't apply. I should preface my comments here with the caveat that we are kind of our confidence level is a little bit lower than usual at this period in the quarter, because we have it's been a few weeks since most airlines have reported their first quarter earnings, and in doing so, that's when they usually give the most commentary of how demand, how we doing as far as what's the demand situation, what's the supply situation. So we're kind of a little bit removed for that. It's not going to be another couple of weeks until we get sort of a fresh perspective, some new information. Having said that, though, our confidence level is still pretty strong based on, we're always hearing periodic things. Good example is IAG, Iberia specifically, gave a big investor presentation. I think it was last week, maybe it was 2 weeks ago. And they basically said demand looks good. And, they might have had, I believe they said, well, yeah, there's maybe some softness in, U.S. economy class, whatever. But I'm speaking very macro here. If you go around the world, most airlines, I think, feel pretty good about the demand situation. They also feel pretty, well, in some ways bad, in some ways good. It's a mixed blessing, I guess you can say. But the supply situation is still very constrained. Most airlines would rather have more aircraft than they have right now. And as many of you know, it's something Gordon and I have talked about sort of ad nauseum in our podcast and in our newsletter, that there are just a lot of production problems with aircraft, a lot of engine issues, we've talked about that a lot. So the supply situation is still constrained. Now, on the cost side, we have gone through a couple of years of very high non-fuel cost inflation. If you think about labor, if you think about aircraft, airports. However, it has been a very good news story on the fuel front over the past year or so, and that continues today. I was listening to a podcast this morning. I think it's from Moody's Analytics, and don't quote me on this. I'm just doing it from memory, but I think they said that worldwide the airline industry will save about $1 billion in fuel costs this year relative to last, based on where fuel prices are right now. So that is still a good news story. Everybody's obviously watching what's going on in the Middle East right now. Another potential shock to the industry. So far, so good on the oil front, though, on the fuel front. So, we'll see. But with that said, we will start talking about what all of you have come here to hear. So I'll turn it back to you, Gordon.
Yeah, thanks for that macro summary, Jay. Super useful. Let's take a look at the topic at play, the pressure perhaps to consolidate, because we are going to be focusing our discussion particularly on North America, specifically the US, and also Europe. But there are some macro trends around the world, which is arguably maybe giving a little bit of pressure towards consolidation in certain regions. Just outline those for us, Jay.
Yeah, I think there is heightened pressure to consolidate. In really, this is a global phenomenon. We'll show you on a couple of slides forward how there have been deals really, you can all corners of the earth. But we decided to just pull out these three particular regions where the activity is just has picked up a lot, I think, recently. And one pressure area you'll find in the U.S. is with these like 3 or 4 low cost carriers, whether it be JetBlue or Frontier, or Spirit, even Southwest, perhaps, that have had a very difficult time in the past couple of years, and coming out of the pandemic, let's call it 2.5 years, where it really has been a struggle to, in some cases, even make money at all, or in other cases, to earn margins like they were earning pre-COVID, and a whole bunch of reasons for that, which again, Gordon and I have talked about that a lot in the past too. But these kind of, you can call them broken business models, low-cost business models in the U.S. have triggered, for example, Frontier to want to merge with Spirit, JetBlue to want to merge with Spirit, even Sun Country, which is doing much better than some of these troubled carriers I mentioned. Even they've talked about, well, we're open to perhaps some sort of consolidation. So that's one area. The story is different in Europe. In Europe, it's more about these 3 big airline groups, and perhaps even others, if you want to extend that into Turkish Airlines, for example, on Europe's eastern periphery. A situation where there's a couple of airlines that are sort of ripe for the picking, and we'll talk about those. Particularly, thinking 2 in particular on the Iberian Peninsula that everybody seems to want. And then I think that other one there was Latin America.
Yeah, and from few to fewer, you said, Jay. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, few to fewer. So this is a very, very large region with a lot of people, with just not very many airlines. We really just have 3 in Mexico, which is probably too few for even a market that size. And then we've got, Copa in Central America. And then in South America, we've kind of got everything sort of coalescing around just two mega groups, one being LATAM and then one being sort of Avianca, which is in bed with GOL, and now Azul wants to get in that, party. So that is interesting for being such a large region with so few airlines. So.
And there are measures short of merging, Jay. We won't go into this in too much detail. This is something we discuss again in Airline Weekly, week in, week out. But the concept of a minority ownership stake is nothing new. It's been around almost as long as commercial aviation has been around in one way or another, but it does seem to be picking up a little bit of traction recently. We've seen Air France KLM Group with SAS, Qatar Airways recently picking up 25% of Virgin Australia. There's some others listed on the screen there. Do you think that's a trend that's likely to continue, this sort of renaissance, if you like, in minority ownership stakes?
Yeah, very very much. It's I think you'll see more of that for sure. It's it offers some advantages and disadvantages. You don't get full control of the airline when you just buy a minority stake, but you also get you can avoid the headaches of consolidation, and maybe we'll talk about what some of those are on a future on an upcoming slide here. But yeah, this has I think accomplished the strategic objectives of a lot of carriers. I think Air France KLM, for example, is happy with their investment in SAS, and we can go on. And feel free, by the way, we're talking through some of these examples very quickly, and that's why we're leaving some time for Q&A. We'll be sure to answer any or try to answer any of your questions that you have about any of these specific deals or whatever's on your mind. So be ready with questions as we go through this. Think of some good ones so you can stump Gordon.
Hey, you like to do that on the podcast, Jay, week in, week out. I'm prepared, I'm battle hardened. And we should say as well that there are some other measures short of merging here. Non-equity partnerships, joint ventures is a popular one, and shallower cooperation as well. Lots of buzz around the United JetBlue deal, but as we discussed in Airline Weekly, Jay, there wasn't a huge amount to it once you scrape the surface, but potentially, despite Scott Kirby and Joanna Garrity saying otherwise, potentially the first step towards something grander, but it did access JFK for United and free up some loyalty consolidation efforts there as well. So just setting the scene there, that there are examples of airlines getting closer without going the full way. Let's assume, Jay, that J Airlines does want to go in for the merger. Let's outline some of the advantages for the business and businesses involved.
Are we going to merge J Airlines and Gordon Air? That's actually a good name for a Gordon Air. I like that.
I don't think you could afford me. Well,
yeah, I have to raise some money on Wall Street. So yeah, it's a good question though. What are the advantages if J Air merges with Gordon Air? What would be the advantages be? I think the history is that most of the advantage comes on the revenue side, not the cost side. And if you think about consolidation broadly across different industries, companies do merge to cut costs in some cases. And you think about the example of, okay, well, we bring two companies together with two different finance and marketing and operations department, and well, now we only need one, so we save money. And there's some of that is true. I think what tends to happen on the cost side though is with airlines is that you wind up having to bring your labor groups up to parity, where everybody's making sort of what the higher paid group used to make. So that often kind of erases a lot of the cost synergies. And that's, may vary across different regions, but where really there's bang for the buck, I think, is on the revenue side. Some of it is just simply, airlines will never say this, but sometimes it's just simply a matter of, okay, look, we've got a very fierce competitor here and we want to get rid of it. We want to turn we want to turn this foe into a friend. So, and that's not, think about JetBlue buying Spirit. They wouldn't come out and say this so explicitly. Although I guess in the end, it didn't matter what they said. They didn't get what they wanted. They could have said.
I was just about to say that, Jay.
Still would have been the same result, but clearly a motivation was that Spirit was a major competitor, a lower cost competitor on some of these northeast to Florida routes, and by buying them, that would eliminate a competitor. So that's I think an important factor. I like to point out the PPP factor here, the people, planes, and property. And I'll use JetBlue as an example again. Whereas if you think back when they decided to buy Spirit in 2022, I think it was, there was at that time a shortage of skilled labor, of pilots, of mechanics. By buying Spirit, that sort of gave them access to that larger labor pool. We talked about the shortage of aircraft, so that's another reason why an airline would want to get their hands on another airline's fleet. And then by property, I just mean things like airport gates, airport slots, things like that. And that can be very valuable too for an airline that's merging. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes by merging two airlines together, you can create new growth opportunities. And in doing so, airlines love to grow because that, brings down their unit costs. That's just the nature of the airline economics. So, maybe you can get some economies of scale that way. Next one is a really, really big factor, particularly in the US. Very, very important in the US, where these loyalty programs are immensely valuable and just throw off so much cash that if you buy another airline and inherit its all its frequent flyer members, its loyalty plan, you suddenly can go to your credit card bank partner and say, "Hey, look, I've I could deliver this customer base of used to be only 50 million, now it's 75 million people." So that is a very, very big deal, and you'll see that when we'll talk about Alaska and Hawaii, very much a factor in their thinking when they were deciding to merge. So there's that. And the final point I'll mention is that the big this is particularly relevant for a smallish airline or a mid-sized carrier. The bigger you become, the more it's almost like insurance against disappearance. You're insuring yourself against collapse. And the concept here is that so many when you're that big, you're a big airline. So many different stakeholders rely on you, whether it be the credit card company that's tied into your loyalty program, or the local airport, or even the local government, local community. You can go on. And so it just becomes very difficult. Like there's always going to be someone to provide you finance at that hour of need. There's always going to be someone to help you. So that
Almost too big to
is
fail, Jay.
too big to fail. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like the banks themselves used to say, too big to fail. So that very much is a factor in the airline business too. You can merge and become too big to fail.
Fahim says she would fly on Gordon Air, and Sean says merge it and rename it Skift Airways.
There you go. Yeah.
Not sure what the marketing team would say about that.
Skift Air, Skift Airways, Skift Airlines. That's always, how to.
Well, Spirit's also already got the yellow and black thing, so we might need to work.
Maybe we'll have to merge
branding
with
there.
Spirit. That'll be another merger advantage there. We get to acquire their logo and their branding, and
There we go.
yeah, we'll talk about that after this.
It's not all blue skies, though, is it, Jay? Because there are some disadvantages of merging. Just talk us through some of the challenges that airlines can classically face.
Yeah, sure. So there are there obviously are challenges with mergers. One being just integration is not easy. I mean, airlines are complex companies that do complex things like fly large, chunks of metal in the air, and have to ensure that safety, and so integration can be difficult. We know from JetBlue and Spirit and several other examples that the regulatory challenges can be rather large and expensive. It's some of these, the process in which you have to get approval from antitrust regulators can often take, years. And you're hiring lawyers, and you're a lot of times you're putting your plans on hold. You otherwise might, let's say, I'm really interested and really think I can make the Florida market work, but I'm going to put that on hold right now because I'm, merging with this Florida airline. So it can be risky in that sense.
It can take a lot of boardroom bandwidth, can it? Just put it simply, it's a distraction.
Yes. Yeah, I think so. And then financing as well. Mergers can be expensive, and you have to ensure that you have the proper financing lined up. I guess the cultural challenges kind of maybe falls under the category of integration. But, imagine an airline, and people talked about, I keep going back to this JetBlue Spirit thing, which never happened. Probably a bad example, because I should use an example that actually came true. But it's just a good example because it's happened relatively recently, and the two very different airlines, right? I mean, Spirit is known for its almost religious like devotion to keeping costs low, whereas JetBlue is very much high priority on upscale service and things like that. So you can see where that might have been a cultural clash. And so you have to keep all these risks in mind. However, I think it's I'm speaking very specifically U.S. now, but I think we can almost say this applies to most mergers in Europe too. They've really all been very successful. If you think about, going back to the first one in the U.S., there's a series of 6 or 7 big ones in the U.S. But the first one being U.S. Airways and America West back in 2005. That looked like it was, risky. It turned out, it saved U.S. Airways, it saved America West, and they wound up, of course, later merging with American, which is another, in the end, it's not that these transactions don't come with headaches. They don't come with, all sorts of challenges. But if you look back, it's really hard to say that any of those big U.S. mergers were really a failure. I mean, I think they've all kind of worked out well. So that's another sort of encouragement factor for, if an airline executive, particularly in the U.S. again, thinking about, should I merge with this airline? One comforting fact is that most of the deals in the past have worked. So, that may give an added push, an added impetus for having more of these deals done.
For sure. They don't always get over the line, but when they do get over the line, once the dust settles and those various integration and regulatory and financing and cultural challenges bed in, actually, more often than not, it works out.
Yeah, I think so. And that's even when, I think a lot of people were criticizing the JetBlue Spirit merger and they said it wouldn't work. And I was maybe a little bit more cautious. I was a little bit more optimistic than most people. And some of you were listening to our commentary back then, two years ago, whenever it was. And the reason for my cautious optimism was, again, that their past mergers, all of them have created a lot of value. So
I'm going to peel. I'm going to peel you away, Jay, from JetBlue and Spirit.
I'll stop talking about JetBlue Spirit.
To speak about a transaction that actually did go through, and that's of course Alaska and Hawaiian. Just using this as a case study. It's not the only one by any means, but just as an exemplar. Why did Alaska buy Hawaiian?
Yeah, so a few reasons. I think in Alaska's case, and again, we're just pulling out this case study. And if you want to talk about any of the others, I'm happy to do so later on. Obviously, we won't have a ton of time to do every major merger in the world, but of course, feel free to contact us afterwards as well. And happy to talk you through them or discuss or listen to what you guys have to say about them. Some of you have some insights. We always like hearing from you as well. So in the Alaska Hawaiian case, specific to Alaska, they were running out of growth opportunities, I think. So Alaska, despite their name, they're actually based in Seattle, Washington, which has been a fantastic market for them. Seattle, just incredible economic growth. Just think about the companies that are based there and all the money they make, the Amazons of the world and Costco's and, Microsoft. So it's been a really great market, but the airport just doesn't have that much space to expand. And back in 2016, I think it was, Alaska bought Virgin America, another U.S. airline. And again, another merger that was difficult for them. There's a lot of operational headaches, a lot of challenges. But in the end, I think it worked out well. I think it did add value. And however, in that merger, they were hoping, similar situation. They wanted to tap new growth opportunities. They were hoping that California would be a growth opportunity for them. I don't think that worked out quite as planned. California is a very, very tough market if you think about who else is in there. They were trying, Virgin was always losing money in their transcons, and I don't want to get into too much detail about that, put you all to sleep. But the Alaska situation, they did want to trigger a new growth opportunity or open up a new growth opportunity. And beyond just, smallish markets like Portland, and I know they're trying San Diego and a few others, but Hawaii, I mean, this is, Hawaii has traditionally been, Hawaii went for there was a period of 10 years where Hawaiian was really, really doing well. There were a couple of years where Hawaiian Airlines was, one of the most profitable airlines in the world. And a lot of that just had to do with, the Hawaii market was really booming. And then they kind of fell into just a whole world of trouble coming out of the pandemic, and their stock price was really, really depressed. And so, picture you're shopping at the store, and you roll past the bargain bin, and you got Hawaiian Airlines laying there, and they picked it up. And we'll see how that works. It's gonna be, they're gonna have the same challenges that we talked about, but a lot of interesting potential there. And then, almost if nothing else, I mean, again, just emphasizing here the immense value in these loyalty programs. Almost, if nothing else, just making their mileage plan more valuable might, that might do the deal on its own. So that, those I gave you three reasons. I'm sure there are others of reasons why they bought Hawaiian. They'll also have some international growth, or let's say intercontinental growth opportunities too, because now they have wide bodies for the first time.
Hey, they're heading to
That
Rome.
to Rome, yeah, and
Mm.
Tokyo and Seoul.
So right, yeah.
Yeah. That might be more in the category of risk than golden opportunity. We'll see. That's good. That's not going to be easy for them. But
I agree.
but again, I digress. So shall we move on to who else are we going to talk about here?
Hey,
Oh,
it's your old friend JetBlue and Spirit. I'm giving you 30 seconds here, Jay.
You know what, on the game show when you say pass, let's move on. I think I've talked enough about that. If anybody has questions about this slide, we'll go back later.
Yeah, some questions are coming in, but there's still time to get any on the live stream chat. Pop any questions in there, and Jay and I will get to them towards the end of the session. But thank you for being gracious, freeing up some time there, Jay. Here's a bit of a cheeky one, because I think we may have some representatives from Southwest joining us on this session. Should Southwest merge with another airline? The pros and cons. What's your take, Jay?
Yeah, so this is just kind of a fun exercise. It's entirely, just speculative here, as we're just wondering, because Southwest is, by the way, whenever I think of Southwest now, I think of that scene in the movie E.T. where the boy opens the closet and then E.T. says, "Elliot." You've seen the movie, right, Gordon? I can't get that scene out of my mind.
No, I know I'm going to dress up for Halloween now. That's great.
Yeah, so that Southwest or E.T. It's maybe they can go together, trick-or-treating together. And for those that have no idea what I'm talking about or what we're talking about here, it's so Elliott is a big investment firm that stepped into Southwest. They bought a large ownership stake and have pushed very aggressively for very big changes. And they haven't gone so far as pushed, as far as we know anyway, pushed for a merger. But because Southwest is sort of in that position right now where they know they need to increase their profit margins, they know they need to introduce new services to people. They need to sort of be more things to more people. They have the opposite problem of I'm trying to think of what are some airlines that try to be too Virgin Australia is a good example of an airline that tried to be everything to everybody and ran into trouble. Southwest a little bit opposite. They may be not doing enough for enough people. So they've talked about, for example, their Nashville is a great market for them, but they have these loyal customers. They can't get them abroad. They can't offer them lounges. So you wonder is can they address that issue without resorting to buying another airline? And the answer may be yes, but you can see some of the reasons why they might find a merger attractive. The premium exposure I mentioned there, you can look at this slide here. They certainly have the balance sheet, so financing is much less of a problem than it would be for some other airlines. This was the case with Alaska too. Alaska's always had a very strong balance sheet, plenty of cash and all that. There's that loyalty program, Rapid Rewards, again, that factor. You wouldn't be reliant on Boeing as much if you bought an Airbus carrier. Maybe the moment is right politically. We don't know what the current Trump administration, what their antitrust policies or what their approach would be. It's really kind of untested, and we know that in the past administration getting these deals was tougher. So it may be the moment is right. The moment could be right for the other reason, the bargain bin reason I mentioned before. It may just be if you look at some of the stock prices of these airlines, they're very, very cheap right now. So maybe, but next slide.
There we go. Some of the cons, perhaps.
Yeah. So there, of course, Southwest does have a very, very unique culture. There certainly is the regulatory risk that doesn't go away no matter who's in office and, who's in the White House. And, the execution risk, the labor risk. It's also, Southwest, they do have a very um, active plan right now with a lot of changes underway to address their issues. So they just, might feel that, uh, merger just they can address their needs in other ways. So we'll see.
Got it. Let's turn our attention, Jay, because Southwest don't go across the Atlantic, at least not yet, although there is that new partnership with Iceland there in the offing. But we can jump across with just the click of a button. We're going to take a quick look at the European market here, because some people describe the European market almost like the US was sort of 20 years ago. Would you agree with that, just in terms of the fragmentation?
Yeah, I think that's very roughly true that the U.S. was a very fragmented market that consolidated, whereas the European market still has a lot of kind of smallish independent airlines kind of littered around the continent. So I think, yeah, I would agree with that, Gordon.
Yep. And then some of the case studies from a European perspective. What do you think Air France KLM saw in SAS, a Scandinavian carrier?
Yeah, good question. So SAS, yeah, Scandinavian carrier that had gone bankrupt. So again, this was an airline that was not going to be extremely expensive. It's not like you're buying at the top market or anything. And here you have this this carrier with that has struggled for a variety of reasons, but does have kind of a rich base of traffic in very wealthy catchment areas, wealthy markets. If you think about some of these markets, Scandinavian markets like Oslo and Copenhagen and Stockholm. I mean, these are, lot of business traffic. So on Air France and KLM, if you can pump that traffic into Paris, into Amsterdam, send that, to all over the world through those hubs, rather than through Lufthansa's hubs, because SAS was previously part of the Star Alliance, which is Lufthansa's that. So you can see the motivation there, right? And then what am I gonna? What's the L word again? I'm gonna say the what's another another motivation. The loyalty plan is another one. Again, these planes are not as big as they are in the U.S., but still, Air France KLM is definitely, their Flying Blue plan is very much a priority for them. It's very profitable, very high margin, and giving adding all these new SAS people in is you can see the potential there. So
Sure.
yeah, a little bit of the reasons why what they were thinking behind that.
And we should say at this juncture, it's just 19.9%, I think, investment in
about
Air France KLM. This
Mhm.
was not a majority shareholding. I think nothing close to it, but there is scope, I believe, for that shareholding to increase in time. Lufthansa and ITA, we have covered actually quite a lot in the Airline Weekly issue. So I would direct anyone that wants to learn a little bit more about the details there to check out the back issues of Airline Weekly. Let's turn our attention to what could come, Jay, on the European continent, and that's where I'm broadcasting from here in Lisbon. TAP Air Portugal and Air Europa. Why are they such hot ticket items when it comes to airline consolidation?
Yeah, these are very much hot topics of consolidation discussion. TAP Air Portugal is an interesting airline that's was renationalized. They were government owned, they were privatized, they went back in government hands during COVID, and the government appears to have the intention of selling it again. And everybody's lining up with roses. I mean, everybody who wants to buy this airline. Air France KLM does, Lufthansa does, IAG does. Gordon and I were just talking before we went on that Turkish Airlines reportedly has some interest. I've heard reports of Etihad. I don't know, but it's a very why is everybody so interested in Iberia? In TAP Air Portugal? They do have some very attractive routes, particularly to Latin America, North America as well, Africa as well. But that South America is kind of their crown jewel. It just so happens that Lisbon is geographically just perfectly situated to link Europe with South America. So imagine, someone going to, Scandinavia to Brazil or Scandinavia to Argentina. It's only kind of natural if you draw a straight line between those two places. It's only natural that you kind of go through Lisbon.
You'd be flying there anyway.
Yeah, you'd probably be flying right overhead anyway. So make a stop. If there's no nonstops, right, you're going to make a stop somewhere. There's a good chance it could be Lisbon. So you can see that's very and that Latin America to Europe market is very strong right now. I mentioned earlier that Iberia gave a presentation whenever it was, couple week or two ago, and they yeah, they're doing very well for them.
What
So
did they called Jay? They said Madrid is the new Miami.
Madrid is the new Miami. Yeah, that's kind of place where all Latin Americans want to go for business and tourism. And so, yeah, we're really hot market now. And Air Europa is kind of a little the same thing. I mean, Madrid is also along that line I referred to, between much of Europe and South America. And of course, you have, the old colonial connections between these, the linguistic connections and all that. A lot of businesses that operate, in Latin America and Spain. So, and it just so happens Air Europa is family owned. IAG tried to buy it. They did acquire, I believe 20%. Is that right, Gordon? Is it where they own 20?
Yeah, thereabouts. Yep.
Yeah. So, they have that. They own that currently. They were unable to buy control. They kind of ran into some regulatory obstacles. The regulators wanted them to, concede too much in terms of, giving up this and that in exchange for, to mitigate the competitive effects. And you can sort of see why, right? I mean, to have Iberia and Air Europa sounds a little anti-competitive to me, but Air France KLM, maybe, or Lufthansa, maybe they'll come in and buy Air Europa. It's the family. So Air Europa, and the thing is, it is a good airline. It's got those really good routes to Latin America. But one of the problems it ran into during COVID is that it borrowed a lot of money from the Spanish government, and I think it was the Spanish government, and was the EU? I think it was Spanish government, and they have to repay that, and so they're under a lot. The family that owns it, a lot of pressure to sell. So that's why there's there's going to be, it may not be a majority control, but there probably some kind of transaction coming up. So
Got it. Thank you for that insight, Jay. Want to get to a couple of questions before we wrap up, but here's a fun one. What about cross-border mergers? Could we ever see IAG and American, for example, becoming a single company?
probably not. I mean, it's something that we've talked about that's been talked about for decades now, and it just never happens. And one reason is there's really nobody pushing for that. I mean, I don't think IAG and American are really lobbying hard for it. I just don't think it would add that. These international joint ventures, IAG works very closely with American on their transatlantic routes, and I think you kind of get all the good stuff without the bad stuff. You don't have the downsides. So I think they're perfectly content. Now, if things change, markets change, technology changes, maybe 10 years from now, we're having discussion that, maybe we need to remove some of these foreign ownership laws and allow full mergers across borders, but probably not anytime soon.
Let's get to some questions. There's one from David here, and I'll point this to you, Jay, and I'll maybe jump in afterwards. He said, were you surprised that the pandemic didn't result in more mergers and acquisitions? It seemed like a golden period in order to get things through that might have otherwise been regulatorily unpalatable.
Yeah.
Were you surprised? I'm maybe thinking off the top of my head, Korean Air and Asiana. That started. The seeds were sown during the pandemic. It's only very recently come to fruition. Is that something that you broadly agree with?
Yeah, I was going to bring that up as well. That the Korean Air Asiana, that was an example of where COVID would have put Asiana out of business, and they got called a shotgun wedding or whatever. They wound up coming together during COVID. I may be forgetting an example or two. Maybe the Air India privatization, which led to the Vistara merger, that probably got its origins in COVID. I think even some of these mergers we talked about earlier too, whether it be the JetBlue Spirit or whatever. I think some of them had their origins during COVID as well. Now remember, during COVID, a lot of airlines were just struggling to survive. I mean, the majority of airlines they were so focused on, how do we wake up alive tomorrow? How do we get our government to give us extra money so we don't go out of business? So that probably stunted some merger activities. But as you can see, as soon as the pandemic eased, the frenzy began, the consolidation party started. So, yeah.
Another one here from Daniel asking, how much do people consider the airline fleets, not just what they've got today, but what they've got on order when considering mergers and acquisitions? Do you think that's a fair assessment, looking not just at what they've got today, but hey, they've got a nice juicy order for coming to fruition in 5 years with Airbus. We want a bit of that. Jump the queue, or is it maybe just a bit too complex in order to get some more aircraft?
Yeah, I think it's a factor now with the aircraft shortage being as it is. I'm trying to think of an example off the top of my head of a merger that might have
Been really driven by
been motivated by that. Yeah, that's can we go back to that slide where we had the different merger examples? I'm not sure. You can say maybe Alaska wanted to get its hands Hawaiian's wide body orders at 787ers. Man, not really so sure about that, but that could be an example. Yeah, I don't really see any examples here, but the Air Europa is an interesting one. It's not so much their orders, but I think a lot of their suitors are attracted by their 787 fleet. I think that's an example, but that's not really your question because you're asking about the orders, not the current fleet. But so yeah, I think it is a factor, but I can't think of any obvious example or any trend of a stampede of airlines running to try to get hold of other carriers' order books. But yeah, it's true. I mean, aircraft order books are more valuable right now because of the aircraft shortage. There's no doubt about it.
For sure. And one last one here before we wrap up. It's from Diane, and she asks, do you ever think we'll see flag carrier by a low-cost airline, or do you think it's always going to be keeping the same market segments without disturbing those passenger flows? So maybe looking at would we ever see a very, very premium flag carrier go for sort of bottom of the rung ULCC?
Yeah, I wouldn't say never. You always have these strange deals, like, and I'm going back far, so probably not too relevant, but America West, a low cost carrier buying US Airways. So, stuff like that comes up based on situational, things that might be happening at any given time. But yeah, it is harder to see the logic. Now don't forget, IAG, which is British Airways, Iberia, they at one time purchased Vueling. They were very much interested in buying Norwegian at one time. They started Iberia Express. They started Level, for example. So, don't put it past the realm of possibility, but of course, yeah, it's a little bit more awkward when because then you have to wonder, well, do you keep the two brands separate? Like in the US, you almost wouldn't do it because you always kind of unify. I mean, I guess I shouldn't say that because Alaska is keeping the Hawaiian brand, but it becomes more, why buy a low cost carrier if you just sort of get rid of the whole business model and the brand and everything.
Sure.
But yeah, you can see it. Yeah, there's no law against it.
All right. Well, I think never say never is good advice, Jay, when it comes to anything regarding the airline industry. And with that final question, we will wrap up today's session. But thanks again to everyone for joining us today. And if you did hear something that resonated with you, we do encourage you to go check out airlineweekly.com. There you can get a sample issue of our sort of flagship newsletter that comes out every Monday, put together by Jay and myself and the wider team, or even explore a subscription. Just scan that QR code on the screen. And as a special thank you for joining us today, we're offering 50% off the first year for new subscribers with the code airlineweekly50. Just scan that QR code and it will take you straight to where you need to be. And if you're looking for details on group subscriptions or even an enterprise subscription, my fantastic colleague Rachel is ready and willing to help. She's available at RM, that's R for Rachel, M for Mills, at skift.com. And we really want, Jay, I think it's fair to say, we want Airline Weekly to be a valuable part of every subscriber's toolkit, whether you're making deals, crafting strategy, or simply trying to understand where the industry is headed. So that's our ambition, and we try and do it week in, week out. And hopefully most of the time we get there. And just a final point, if you do want to join us in person, check out live.skift.com for more details about our upcoming events. The Skift Global Forum in New York springs to mind straight away, Jay. Still putting together the final touches to that agenda. But I think already we've got the CEO of Riyadh Air, Tony Douglas, due to join us. AirAsia's Tony Fernandez. That's in New York in September. We've also got the Skift Aviation Forum returning to Dallas Fort Worth in December. Last year, we had a sort of all-star cast with Robert Isom from American Airlines, Bob Jordan from Southwest, Willie Walsh from IATA, and so many more. Go to live.skift.com for all the details to get your tickets, and there's some early bird pricing on there as well. But in the meantime, that brings us to the end of our special web session today. Thanks to all of our behind-the-scenes production team, including Monica and Alex. Thanks, of course, to Jay for joining me, and thanks again to you as well. We hope to see you again very, very soon. Bye for now.